I have a few things that I want to talk about today, and so I'll just switch between them. The first one is the topic that lots of New Age gurus talk about. They go, well, there is no yesterday or tomorrow, there's only the now, as though reality is digital and it's all meshed into one. That is a complete false teaching. It's based upon the timeline, if you will, of God. Because with God there is no past or future. It's all in the now. The issue, however, is that God created this particular reality for us to develop, and that's just the way it is. It would be the same thing as if you were sitting in a car going 100 miles an hour and you are talking to people in the car and you say, well, there's no such thing as speed. As you can tell, it's all right in the now. Well, if you open the door and jump out, you'll quickly realize that there are more realities than what you are aware of. And one of them is you're going 100 miles an hour, even though you think you're not. The illusion that when you're speaking in the car that there's no such thing as speed is in fact an illusion, because in fact there is speed and you're speeding. So the issue with there's no yesterday or tomorrow or whatever is a false teaching. There is a yesterday and tomorrow in this particular reality. That's the reality we're in. That's the reality. It's like, for instance, where you really are. Let's say you've got some sort of a sedative where you're unconscious in the true reality where God is. In that particular reality, you might as well not even be there because you're not conscious of that particular reality. You're only conscious of this particular reality, and in this particular reality that, by the way, God created. So it is disrespectful to say there's no yesterday or there's no tomorrow, when in fact there is a yesterday and tomorrow, because God created it for us. So to be disrespectful and say that that doesn't exist is in fact that disrespectful. And it's teaching a false reality also. So there's more than one reality. In this particular reality, which has been going on for billions of years, in Hinduism it's called a kalpa of time, which is similar to, science has reduced it to what they call the Big Bang, 13 billion years or whatever the case may be. But in fact, time does exist. And in that particular reality that we are living, we reincarnate time after time after time after time. And even that could be taking place in different dimensions, for instance. This isn't the only dimension. So you die here and you may be in another dimension where time is a little different, or maybe time doesn't even exist in that particular realm for whatever reason, and then you're back here again. So to deny that time exists is not only disrespectful, but it isn't true. So again, with God, there is no such thing as time. But this phenomenon of time that God created for us is a way for us to become one with God, or to become like God, or to become at least something, because we started off as no thing, or nothing is what another way to refer to it as. It's a seed, as Jesus put it, and a seed develops into whatever that particular seed is. It could be a palm tree, it could be a flower, it could be anything, but you don't know until you water it and you give it the heat, and you give it sunlight, etc., etc. Well, that's exactly what's going on right now in this particular reality, where there is a yesterday, a today, and a tomorrow. So, now, if you want to talk about there is no now in regards to God reality, you actually have to transcend this awareness level and be fully enlightened as Buddha was, and then even beyond that. And then you'll be able to comprehend what it means there is no such thing as time. But that isn't in this reality. In this particular reality, there is time. Now, Buddha, Jesus, everyone says, well, wake up, wake up, wake up. Well, in fact, we are awake here, and in this particular reality where we're awake, there's a yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But when you awaken, which is referred to as enlightenment, you are awake in two realities at the exact same time. You're awake in a reality where there is no such thing as time, and you're awake in this particular reality where there is time. And so you get to go back and forth. And that's why Zen, the teaching of Zen, is typically taught by unenlightened people that do not understand what Zen is, for the most part. But Zen is so interesting because it is so confusing, and I love it actually, because it's so interesting, because Zen is using a time frame of no such thing as time and relating it to people in this particular reality where there is time. So it's an enlightened master that is using both realities at the same time, trying to tweak and adjust things so a person will awaken. They have Zen cones, and all of these types of things are to cause like a machine, you're throwing a wrench into it or something. Well, your particular reality, that Zen is trying to throw a wrench into your reality to shake you up and help you to awaken to what is actually going on in this reality, and to realize what the other reality is, where time actually does not exist. But anyways, that's kind of a cool thing. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is they talk about mystery and mystics and all of that kind of thing. But again, that's kind of, mystery is just a word. It's like, do you think there's any mystery with God? Of course not. God, there is no mystery. Mystery means you do not understand something. Once you understand it, there's no such thing as mystery anymore. So a mystic is an individual that understands what's going on, but the people he's teaching or talking to do not understand what that person is talking about. And so that would be a mystic. They're talking about things that they understand, but that nobody else understands. A Gnostic is another word that I like, because a Gnostic just simply means the same thing as a mystic, essentially. It's a person that understands the reality that is beyond this particular reality. And consequently, that is why a lot of the churches and the people in the churches put to death all the mystics, or excuse me, the Gnostics, thousands of years ago, because it was very embarrassing for the authorities, if you will, in the organized churches to be going around teaching with all of their prestige and everything. And then you have a person that's a Gnostic that knows exactly what reality is, and is essentially telling the authorities that they're teaching the wrong principles and concepts, that in fact this might be what the truth is. And of course, being embarrassed and whatever, it's like it's better to just put them to death and call them satanic or whatever the case may be. But that's the issue with Gnostic, and that's why, and furthermore, you can't put a Gnostic to death. That's the interesting aspect. You can kill a Gnostic if you want, but another one's going to be born, and they're just going to raise up again, and it's like whack-a-mole. You're never going to get rid of the Gnostics. they're not born as a Gnostic, but like I'm a Gnostic. So consequently, they'll go through 20, 30, 50 years or whatever, and then they become awakened or enlightened, or they'll understand what Jesus was trying to teach people, and then they become a Gnostic again. And of course, the authorities don't like that. But nowadays, in our modern society, it's frowned against killing Gnostics and stuff. So people like me get to live without being killed, which is kind of cool for me. The other issue I wanted to cover is devotion to God. Now, of course, that's a difficult, well, no, it's not difficult. It's an impossible scenario for the New Age non-duality people. Non-duality is just a bold-faced lie, if people know what they're teaching. But more essentially, what non-duality is a misunderstanding of Advaita, and so they think they're God and stuff like that. And so, of course, when you think you're God or an aspect of God or whatever the case may be, you're not going to have any devotion for this foreign entity, if you will, that you know there's no such thing as a foreign entity, that you are everything. You are God. You are everything. So there's no possibility of you paying devotion to some foreign entity that others refer to as God. So that's the negative issue with non-duality. You're never, ever, as a non-dual person, ever going to become enlightened. You're never, ever, ever going to, when I say never, ever, as long as you hold true that non-duality is a representation of true reality, as long as you maintain that in your mind and in your psyche and in your spirit, you're never going to transcend ignorance. You're never going to transcend this particular reality. It's the wheel of samsara. You just continue to be born into the same thing, which is another description of insanity. So reality is, somehow, if you don't already have this devotion for God, you have to study, you have to read, you have to pray, you have to, excuse me, you have to do whatever it is you have to do to become aware of what God is. And in doing so, then you can start to develop your love and devotion for God. Because if you don't have a love and devotion for God, you're never going to receive the spiritual blessings of knowledge and reality that transcends this level plane of existence. And so, again, samsara, you just continue to go around in circles. So that is an issue that is woefully lacking in lots of, or shall I say all of the New Age non-duality teaching. They just absolutely lack any devotion for God, because to them, and it's just a foreign, no, it's not even foreign, it's just a reality that they laugh at and think it's stupid, because of course they're convinced that they are God. Non-duality to me is kind of a funny thing, because it's like, all new non-duality people, they start off as normal individuals, thinking reality is this, that, and everything else. And then they eventually go listen to other people and they go, oh, I'm not my ego, I'm not my ego. Well, what's an ego first? Well, I got to find out what an ego is. Oh, okay, I'm not that. First of all, I thought I was a truck driver. Oh, I'm not a truck driver. I'm not an ego. Oh, this physical body. I'm not a physical body. So they keep going backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And then they get down to the nth degree and they go, well, there's nothing beyond God. I mean, you got atheism here, and then the next step beyond atheism, there has to be God. So they're on the razor's edge of atheism. Well, actually, most of them are atheists, but they're right on the edge of the razor. On this side, there is God. On this side, there's no God. And so they stand right here because they've eliminated everything else in reality. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not. And then they stop right here and they go, uh-oh, I'm God. That's a non-duality person. It's funny, actually, to watch them in their pride and everything go, I'm God. And it's like, you have to give up everything, they say. You have to give up your ego. You have to give up this. And it's like, okay, well, what are you then? I'm God. And it's like, dude, you have to give up God too. And then, of course, once you do that, boom, you're over the razor's edge and there's nothing. And you're an atheist. So non-duality is a joke, actually. It's for non-thinking people that apparently don't have the brain capacity to think through things. It's funny watching that happen anyway. I shouldn't be laughing about that. It's because it's kind of sad. But anyways, the devotion to God is something that you have to nurture. You have to, it's like a garden. You have to water it, you have to tend it, you have to de-weed it, all of these sorts of things. And then you start to get a little teeny bit. It's like the fruit, Jesus talked about this, the fruit and the things start manifesting. And this could take years, it could take an entire lifetime. But these, you start to get results eventually when you have this profound love for God and it starts to grow and develop and everything. And then you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, now the last thing I wanted to talk to you about today is another issue that a lot of gurus talk about. And this has been going on for tens of thousands of years. And they go, well, you need to pursue bliss and you need to happiness and joy and meditate upon bliss and all of this kind of things. Okay, well, that's kind of like selfishness. I'm not denigrating being happy. I'm not denigrating bliss or anything like that. But if you pursue it, you're never going to get it. Let me repeat that. If you pursue bliss and happiness and joy, you're never, ever going to get it. It's just like what they say, if you pursue enlightenment, you're never going to become enlightened. All of these things are true. Enlightenment is a byproduct of an awakening, if you will. And I can talk about that on another video. I have talked about it before. But bliss, joy, and happiness, all of these things are a byproduct of other things. So if you pursue bliss, if you pursue happiness, if you meditate upon joy and happiness, you're never going to get it. I mean, how many stories do you have to see in the news about, of course, unfamous people we never hear about, but the famous people we hear about on the news. And you've heard the stories. They pray and they meditate and they have millions and billions of dollars, and the next thing you know, they've committed suicide or they've jumped off a bridge or whatever the case may be. And they seemingly had everything, but they were pursuing bliss, joy, and happiness and all these things. And that's why they committed suicide. They never got what they wanted because you can't get it that way. Bliss, joy, and happiness is a byproduct. What is their byproduct of? You're not going to want to hear this. It's a byproduct of love. It is and love, you can't create love. Love is, I don't want to say love is a byproduct, but you cannot have true love without understanding at least a modicum of what God is and a devotion to God. Because see, the thing is God is 100% love. Lucifer, no love. So when you are on the side of love and pure love, a byproduct of that is joy, bliss, happiness, and all these things. So if you really do want these things, don't pursue them. Instead, pursue God. Pursue understanding what God is and what God what God is trying to accomplish with this particular material reality that is in actuality an illusion, but trying to understand why it exists, why you are born, why you are here, trying to understand what the hell I'm talking about, trying to understand why the sun comes up in the morning, why the earth rotates, trying to understand what the purpose of it is all about. And you're not going to understand if you just study science. You're going to have to get that sort of information vertical, like I've talked about before, vertical, straight up, straight, whatever you want to call it, any direction, but not the material direction. You have to go straight up, and you're not going to find it in the dogma of organized religion or faiths or anything else. You have to go up. And the only way to do that, it's like a rocket that you ignite and it goes up and the rocket fuel propels it, and it's like, well, if you have a rocket with no rocket fuel, it just sits there. When the wind comes, it blows over. So to have all this joy, bliss, and happiness, and enlightenment, by the way, and all these other things, you need rocket fuel. And what is rocket fuel? Rocket fuel is love. It is the love of God that propels you vertical so that you obtain all these things. So you can spend your entire lifetime going and visiting gurus and reading and all of this stuff, but it's all for naught if you don't have this love for God. If you don't, I mean, the easiest way to start understanding what God is all about is read. I mean, Buddha never spoke anything about God because he didn't know anything about God. He didn't say God didn't exist. He said he didn't know anything about God, therefore he's not going to say anything about God. He was dealing with this physical particular reality and realized through enlightenment that it's an illusion. He didn't know why it was an illusion. He only knew it was an illusion. And then later in his life through the Lotus Sutra, he understood a little more about God. But the reality is you have to be able to understand what God is. Jesus he even said, I'm the example, follow me. Okay, well, as I've said many times, the Bible is corrupt and all of that stuff. But be that as it may, it's the only thing that we have that speaks about Jesus. So go for it. Get whatever version you want and study it to the best of your ability to find out what did Jesus teach? And why did he teach that? Etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of good things that is attributed to Krishna. Read about that. That doesn't necessarily deal with God so much. It more deals with rules and regulations and consequences and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it's kind of interesting. And you put that together with Buddha, and then you take Jesus and you kind of ball it all up together, and then you'll start to build a little bit of love with it, which is fuel in your rocket, and you'll do some vertical climbing, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And then as a byproduct of that, you may become enlightened, and then you'll understand what true joy and happiness is. I mean, true joy and happiness, I'm sorry, but nobody commits suicide if they have true joy and happiness and bliss and all those things. They're exceedingly happy. And furthermore, it's a fake happiness and joy when you see these monks, if you will, or whatever, that are just sitting and meditating all the time. They're pretending that they have joy and happiness. I assure you, they do not. You can convince yourself of anything if you want to play some sort of mind games with yourself and brainwash yourself into you're having pure joy and happiness, but you're going to die and you're going to be reborn, and instead you won't be a monk this next time and you'll be something else. You're not going to get out of this life by doing it a fake way or tricking yourself into believing in crackpot stuff like non-duality or any of these other crazy things that keep the wheel of samsara around. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not denigrating this particular reality, and I'm not denigrating the fake joy and happiness. I mean, everybody has to go through this life, and everybody has to experience it in their own way. And if your own way is deadlocked in some sort of samsaric cycle of doing the same thing over and over and over again, hopefully, sometime you'll awaken. But when you do, it's like, oh my God, you can't imagine it's the joy and happiness. I mean, seriously, but you're not going to get it in books. You're not going to get it from gurus. You can temporarily. There's plenty of gurus that you can go to and stuff like this, and it's a temporary bandage, if you will, but it's only temporary. The real stuff is not temporary. The real stuff, real enlightenment and real joy, bliss, and happiness, this is not temporary. In fact, it never goes away. If you have it once, it will never leave you. No matter how miserable your life is or how good your life is, it will never, never, never leave you. But you have to go vertical for that. There is no other way to get it. I mean, there is no other way. Anyways, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a good day. And next week I'll try to make some others. Have a good day. Bye.